Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Hello, hipsters, and welcome back to another episode of Hip News. We are now one third of 2022, and since Easter is right around the corner, we will take a look at the two ends of a burning candle: religion and war. What does faith have to do with war, and what is in it when the war is to be fought? Of the ideal of good and evil and the values of what is the fine line of political gain and spiritual morality. I'm Vessel 1, and with me, Vessel 2. Vessel 2, how are you doing today?
Today is another day here on the planet, so all is good. I cannot complain, shall not complain. How about you, Vessel 1? How you doing?
As always, my brother, I'm thankful and blessed. We're here doing the honorable thing and bringing forth what's in the dark and putting it out there and showing people what's hidden in plain sight.
Excuse me. Now, question is it hidden in plain sight?
Yeah. What is?
Hidden in plain sight.
This is news to me. Hidden in plain sight.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad.
Please stay tuned. Hold it now, wait.
Please, wake up.
So, John, you and I are, I think, two of the very few progressives in the media who are outspoken about saying, we believe in something out there. It's I call myself a Christian, although I'm guessing probably most churches wouldn't want me because I think my beliefs are a little larger than that. And I can't speak for you, but it seems to me like, there's this, is God dead, or does it just seem that way because the Republican Party has basically repudiated every single one of Jesus's teachings, from the Sermon on the Mount stuff. I mean, simple, seminal stuff like when you pray, don't pray in public, for public acclamation or acclaim. Instead, go in your closet and close the door and pray. And all these Republicans are like, we have to have prayer in schools, and I want to things like in Matthew 25. The disciples came to him and said,
Matthew 25.
How do we get into heaven? And it's literally the only place, to the best of my knowledge, in the New Testament where Jesus says specifically, here's how you get into heaven. And he says, feed the poor, feed the hungry, heal the sick, clothe the naked, or the modern version of that would be house the homeless. And the disciple
and be kind to people in prison. Be kind to people in prison.
That's correct. And the disciples. And the disciples freaked out. They said to him, we've never seen you thirsty or hungry. And he says, as you do to the least of these among you, you've done unto me. Why? The Republican Party spits on this stuff.
Oh, yeah, of course they do. Now, you're exactly right. And by the way, it's very important. When you talk about Matthew 25, Jesus says he will gather the individuals and the nations. That's very important because our average right-wing Christian, you bring up to the fact that, Donald Trump and Jesus don't go hand in hand. I mean, anyone who supports both Trump and Jesus is someone who has not read either of their books. The only things Donald Trump has in common with Jesus, Tom, they both hung out with prostitutes and they both used ghostwriters. That's it. So, our right-wing Christians, and I, like you, I believe in thumping Bible thumpers with the Bible. I think it's disgraceful that the Democrats have surrendered God to God's unauthorized mean fan clubs. But they'll say, Jesus says to take care of the poor, but he doesn't say government should make me blah, blah, blah. Government shouldn't pick my pocket. Listen, Jesus didn't have democracy. We do. And whether you believe in the Bible as absolute literal fact or metaphor, whether you think Jesus was the divine Son of God or the original hippie or just a first century mystic or the original innocent brown-skinned man executed by the state, he consistently stands for the marginalized. Trump Christians consistently disparage and crap on the marginalized, whether it's war refugees, the Christian refugees at our southern border they call illegals, trans kids who want to use a bathroom they feel comfortable in, trans soldiers who want to serve a country that seems to despise them, the least of my people. So you can't follow Trump and Jesus. And I think, Tom, any church that wouldn't take you ain't a church, and they certainly wouldn't take a peaceful, radical, nonviolent revolutionary who hung out with lepers and hookers and crooks, who never spoke English, was not an American citizen. Jesus was anti-capitalism, anti-wealth, completely anti-public prayer, as you mentioned, never anti-gay, never mentioned abortion. Criminalizing abortion has now become what Christianity is. Jesus never justified torture or asked a leper for a copay, and he was a long-haired, brown-skinned, that's in Revelation, brown-skinned, unarmed, community organizing, anti-slut-shaming, homeless, Middle Eastern Jew. That's the guy we're talking about. I would love to see the Democrat. And again, you don't need to believe in the Bible as literal fact to call out the hypocrites on this. One of the things I love that you do is that you actually quote the scripture. I do this almost every night, Mr. Harmon, with my listeners on Sirius XM. I'll say, please cite one teaching of Christ that Donald Trump and the modern GOP have ever fought for legislatively. Just one. Well, if you want to know how biblically illiterate some of these Bible thumpers are, Tom, I recommend this question. It all goes to abortion. And the Bible is not against abortion. This is the greatest racket they've ever done. They have gotten followers of Jesus to vote against everything Jesus ever talked about by talking about abortion, which Jesus never talked about. God says life begins with first breath in Genesis. God asserts that a woman's life has more value than a fetus's in Exodus. God gives abortion tips for unfaithful wives in Book of Numbers. And let's just say, if you think God really cares about kids, let me tell some Gentiles about Passover. So for me, it's about thumping Bible thumpers with the Bible, because Christ was an extremely liberal guy, and that's why these folks would rather worship him as a god, because that's a lot easier to do than follow his inconveniently liberal teachings.
That's brilliant, John. I had completely forgotten about Passover. That's where God killed the firstborn child of all the Egyptian families. I mean, that's even more radical than abortion.
God is technically the least pro-life character in the book. He commands the Israelites to kill tons of, ripping children from their mothers. Look, yeah. I'm not saying Jesus is pro-abortion. I'm saying the racket, the reason why the Republican Party can keep winning elections. And let's not forget, they've lost the popular vote in 7 of the last 8 presidential contests, but they've done it by convincing people that criminalizing abortion, which is what they're fighting for, right? They're never going to end abortion. Abortion will always go on, just illegal, unsafe abortions. But that criminalizing abortion is more important than everything Christ actually talked about. I mean, these Christians have never read the Gospels.
Amen.
Jesus is not their savior. Trump is their savior. Jesus is their prop. And with no hatred in my heart, I'm about calling them out for it, because I'm tired of seeing the religion of my mom and dad being prostituted for a cult of meanness that props up this bloated reality show racist clown.
Amen. And your question, please name one piece of legislation essentially that the Republicans have pushed that would comport with Jesus's teachings. Is brilliant. And for 18 years on this program, I've been running a contest, and nobody has won this yet. Please name one piece of legislation that was written by a Republican legislator, that was passed through Congress with a majority Republican votes, that was signed into law by a Republican president, whose principal beneficiary is the working class or the middle class of America.
That's it.
Name one piece of legislation that meets that criteria. In 18 years, nobody has won that contest. The last point I'd like to make, John, because we're going to hit a break here in about a minute, maybe 2 minutes thereabouts, is morality. What makes me crazy are these people, typically on the right, but who are trying to justify their weird notions of religion, who say, without religion, there is no morality. People don't know how to behave without the 10 Commandments. That's why we have to put them on our schools. That's why we have to. And you can look at any indigenous community in the world that never heard of any religion, any organized religion, and they know that you don't beat your children. They know that you don't, rape people or steal from. Let me throw that to you.
Tom, but you notice they always want to put the 10 Commandments on the courthouse walls, right? Never the Beatitudes. Never,
There you
never
go.
the words of Christ. They want to do the 10 Commandments. 8 of those 10 are completely legal in this country. Only 2 of those commandments are illegal, and Donald Trump has violated all 10. But in the Beatitudes, in the Sermon on the Mount, that's what scares them. Jesus overturns the death penalty in the Beatitudes. Literally, like, you tell people that the Bible's not against abortion, but Christ is against killing a sinner. Whoa, they will hate you as only a Trump Christian can. And I ask the same question. I always ask my listeners, name one thing since Nixon and the earned income tax credit that the GOP has done where they have put non-millionaires ahead of millionaires. And I never get an answer. I just get a lot of profanity thrown back by the faithful.
Yeah, great minds think alike.
What say you, Vessel 2?
That was a lot. That was a lot. I'm definitely in agreement with the notion of thumping Bible thumpers with their own Bible. So everything that he said, it kind of made sense to me. How about yourself? What did you hear that sparked your interest?
Well, there was a lot of gems that he dropped in. First of all, he said it not once but twice. Dark skin or brown skin man when he was talking about Jesus, and of course, he ended it in calling Jesus a Jew. But
He did.
as we know, as you know, Jesus was somewhere in the warm part of the world where mostly melanated people existed. So was that a hint or was that something else? I'll leave it to the listeners to decide that. Also, it is funny, and I do like you concur with the agreements of that there are mostly a lot of hypocrites when it comes to talking about religion and to understand or know the fine line of what is right and what is wrong. They did mention about abortion and the taking of a life, and also it mentioned about Passover, and that was something interesting that was in the Bible that I always thought or had somewhat questions at mind, you know. Any insight?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in the Bible that have or should be questioned. And
yes.
It opens a lot of doors when you go and have these conversations with people. But you know how they say religions are one thing and spirituality is another. So I recommend spirituality over religion all day, every day.
Yes, agreed. But bringing it to the forefront of this episode dealing with religion and war, as you know, in the latter part of the Bible, they talk about Revelation, which is somewhat called a religious war.
Yeah, as I stated before, the Bible has a lot of things that you should question in it. And I agree with you say as far as how things seem to go, but I mean, things are going this way and it's being directed off of stolen land. So I don't expect things to go well as long as the people who are in control are still in control. So this it is, as I stated before, this is religion, but this is a spiritual war. And once you have your spiritual connection, then you find yourself to be connected in more ways to a lot of things that are, I would consider to be beyond religion.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this is
Agreed.
on the spiritual realm. I think it does line up kind of opposite of how it's being ran visually or in front of our eyes, you would say. If you kind of pay
Right.
attention to the spiritual realm, it's still a battle to be had.
Right.
I think the problem is uh, once you have read the discovery doctrines, and you
Right.
know what their religion is about, stemming from the Pope sanctioning Catholics to go around the world and pursue Christianity to those countries, uh, particularly Asia and Africa. They were,
Right.
sent out on missionary missions to convert everybody. So
Right.
once, for me personally, knowing that bit of piece of information, to hear and think about religion, or I don't think once you learn that piece of information, then sitting down and learning religion makes a lot of sense. So
Right.
I can't really say that I follow a religion, but if you watch those who follow that religion, then you can see exactly what they're doing.
Exactly. Well, it reminds me of, it brings a song to mind by Yellow Man, the reggae artist, and the title is "Fools Go to Church on Sunday."
Yes,
And
they
in
do.
those lyrics, it's very interesting. Yeah. So yeah, but I am a total agreement with you. Once you have the information, or once you know what uh, this somewhat religious, I don't want to say scam because I don't want to offend anybody, but there's a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of things that's happening, and people are somewhat misled, and it's a shame. But hopefully, again, with the coming tides that's happening with the universe, and as it align and change, and and being in the age of Aquarius, I'm pretty sure that we will see um, what is what, and what's been hidden will be coming to light. So with that, let's continue, and we're moving along from the religious aspect of things to the war aspect of it. And most politicians or most governments are enraging of it's not morally spiritual, but more or less for profit gain. And we have Jesse the Body that we're gonna go ahead and listen to, and he's gonna give his take on that.
Well, but let's talk about some of the other things that you want to bring to the
Sure.
public's attention. Privatization seems to be a major concern of yours. What bothers you about it?
A privatization, I like it to a point, but I'm seeing it. Well, one of the things is I'm seeing the military become privatized with mercenaries. We now have more mercenaries deployed overseas in Iraq than we do actual soldiers. Blackwater, things of that nature. I don't like that because they don't fall under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. These are cowboys out there with guns. And like you said, Bremer gave a pass to Blackwater. and they committed some murders over there, out-and-out murders, I believe.
Well, the whole thing accelerated during the Bush years. Have things improved as far as you're concerned now that Barack Obama is in the White House?
Well, not really, because Barack Obama campaigned and said he'd get us out of these wars. And he seems to be escalating them. Granted, he shifted it back to Afghanistan. Well, why wasn't Afghanistan taken care of initially? Well, we got sidetracked into Iraq. And that's what made me question 9/11. Because when I found out Bush was going to go into Iraq, I sat back and thought, wait a minute. These 19 hijackers that they claim hit the World Trade Center, there wasn't one Iraqi among them. Well, to me, that's like Pearl Harbor. If the Japanese attack us at Pearl Harbor, well, then let's go get Korea. After all, they're Asian, too.
Well, there are people who feel that no matter what had happened, we would have wound up going into Iraq because there had already been talk among some of the people in the Bush administration before he was elected about going to Iraq.
Yeah, and in fact, the day after 9/11, with all that testimony, remember when they told Richard Clark the very next day, get us Iraq. We want a connection to Iraq. And I've also learned that a lot of the torturing that went on in Guantanamo was they wanted to try to torture guys so they could back up the fact of weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. They wanted to torture people so they'd admit to that, which, of course, was completely false.
When you were running for governor, did you have the same attitudes about what was going on with government?
Not really. I ran for government. The main issue for me of running at the time was I was actually doing talk radio, and I kind of backed myself in the corner, and you know that if you lose your credibility.
Yeah, the government is wicked. It seems like they continue to say it's not a world war, but it seems like since World War II, America's been at war ever since.
What every and anybody they can get their hands on.
And if you go against the grain, then you either got to get down or lay down. That's the only choices you got.
They send merchants to, just throwing it out there, the Middle East. And it recently came out with this debacle with Russia and Ukraine. If I'm not mistaken, America sent merchants over there to train the Ukrainians, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
It's possible. I mean, we're talking about the biggest arms dealer on the planet. Why wouldn't we go send people to train what we sold them?
Well, yeah.
Makes sense to me. You know what I mean? It makes sense to me. Yeah, that is what, as far as the economic goes, that is what America does. America sells weapons.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And
That's
don't try to outdo them in that field, or there'll be problems. Don't try to outdo them in the oil game, or there'll be problems.
right.
It seems like they don't have a problem necessarily selling technology off here and there.
Yeah.
Or allowing people to come into the country and buying up spots.
Right.
And anything that happens inside of America stays in America. It's not really discussed outside in the public view as far as the overseas is concerned. The only country that's really ever really spoken up, I think, in my recollection, is China. They made a couple of references. But yeah, man, the government of America is wicked. They do a lot of stuff that needs to be checked by the hard tax paying citizens who are supposed to be the people who are in control of the government, supposedly.
Right. And not the other way around. That's the interesting aspect of it all, because
That's
you would
what
think
that's what the motto is.
as we continue and move on further, I really am concerned about if, like you said, if they're not checked, how far and where would this end up or lead to? And that's I think the biggest question that majority of people are probably thinking, but are too scared to ask, maybe, or what will happen in the long run. And by not speaking up or not checking the government and their actions or the dubious actions that they're doing, will in the long term, we might end up by being silenced, also end up giving our freedom as well. So this is a big concern, or should be a concern to each and everybody out there listening. This is the final clip of this episode, and this is a clip from DW News, and they're talking about Russia using religious sentiments to support political crusades. So this is the icing on the cake, I presume, that it will show you how everything will come together of religion and war.
All right, so the later clip.
Yes, here we go.
The Vatican says that Pope Francis would be willing to facilitate dialogue to help stop the war in Ukraine. A large majority of the Ukrainian population identifies as Orthodox Christian, and while their religious leaders have publicly condemned the invasion, recent statements by the head of the Orthodox Church, Russian Patriarch Kirill, openly supported Moscow's invasion. This has splintered the worldwide Orthodox Church and is raising fears of religious strife.
It's 2020, and around 50 kilometres from Moscow, a cathedral is being inaugurated in honour of the armed forces, a sign of how tightly entwined Orthodox Christianity and politics are in Russia. The influence of the Orthodox Church leader is hard to underestimate. Moscow's Patriarch Kirill has made no bones about where his loyalty lies. He's spoken of Russia's opponents as evil forces, portraying Ukraine as a nation succumbing to what he calls sinful Western practices, such as gay pride parades. In Ukraine, some 30 million Orthodox Christians are split between a self-governing church and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is part of the Moscow Patriarchate. But since the invasion, the rival leaders have been united in their condemnation of Russia, with some churches left not even able to provide a sanctuary from the assault. Many clerics in Ukraine are now joining calls for a complete split from the Moscow Church. And while Kirill preaches justification, Ukraine's 4.5 million Catholics are looking to the head of their church to wage peace. But while Pope Francis has called it a war which sows death, destruction and misery, he has neither named Vladimir Putin as the aggressor nor appealed to Kirill to intervene on the side of peace.
I'm now joined in the studio by DW's religious affairs analyst Martin Gag. Martin, religion has been sort of a bit of an underexposed side of this conflict. Many people have been asking themselves, why is Putin doing all this? How important is faith for Putin's war?
I think that for the war itself, religion plays actually a pretty important role. It's very difficult to gauge how important it is for Putin or how sincere he might be in his religious commitments. But there is a very long history in Russia of essentially recruiting religious sentiments among the population in order to support political crusades. And the proximity of the Orthodox Church, particularly the Muscovite Patriarchate, to the Kremlin has been essential for Putin to actually rally the population behind the war effort. So, in a sense, it's not really just a theological matter, but the church represents a very strong cultural position, which is very conservative, very reactionary, and sees basically the Kremlin as a very capable defender of those social and cultural positions.
Ukraine is important for the Orthodox Church. Briefly explain why.
Very much so, because the process of conversion of Rus, or the process of conversion of the Slavic world, really to some degree starts in Ukraine, coming from the south, coming from Greek Orthodox churches, Cappadocia and Turkey. But it's really the Ukraine what opens, so to say, the gates of the Slavic world to Christianity. For the Russians, the Ukrainian church is actually very important, and it has been one that has been very close to the Muscovite Patriarchate. But obviously, Kirill is also a very divisive figure, and now for really quite a long time. So he has actually managed over the last couple of years to break relations to several of his Orthodox peers.
So could we regard Kiev as the founding place, really, of the Russian Orthodox Church, isn't it? And could we regard this war as Putin's war to reclaim the Jerusalem, if you will, of the Orthodox Church?
Look, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind, at least following sort of the cycle of news and explanations, that there is a very strong messianic message being essentially, deployed. It's not really coming across when you look at politicians and when you listen to the news, but it's certainly there when you actually start to hear what people are saying in different parishes, in different churches, and so on. It's obvious that the split of the Ukrainian church, which now has actually a three-way split, is seen as basically a runaway congregation for the church in Moscow. But I think that it's also the case that the proximity of Orthodoxy with Russian sentiments of identity tend to actually look at Ukraine as something that is essentially an escaping child of the Rus myth of the Russian, not empire, but certainly imperium, sort of the space of influence.
Religious affairs correspondent Martin Guck there. Thank you, Martin.
What say you?
Yes. Very, very interesting. Sounds like some Bloods and Crips type of event. Jumping off.
It does. It sounds like a what you want to say? Some type of rivalry of two hoods going at it. I'm not sure if this is the modern day Inquisition or is it just a chin check. I don't know what's going on here, but yeah, it's
not sure what to label it, simply because that landmass has been separated due to war.
Right.
And without choosing sides, you have to recognize that it's still death on both sides.
Right, that's all.
And so what is it all about? I would normally say it's probably about, that area just being that area of the European landmass. Well, not even a landmass, that part of the landmass which is called Europe, because it's a very small part of that landmass. But in that area, they have been warring with each other for eons.
Yeah, that's correct.
But this area of Asia hasn't necessarily been the case. Because they used to be all kind of united. So it was more or less inside, tribal, I'm assuming. But it wasn't it wasn't Europe. Am I right?
That's correct.
It was always a separation from the Soviet Union and Europe.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So technically this conflict would be similar to the Hatfield and McCoys if you translate it over to the American homeland front, basically.
Right.
Or it'd be like, it's not a comparison of the Civil War, but the Civil War had relatives fighting each other per se.
Each other. That's true. The Northerners and the Southerners, or the Yankees.
But the reason for the fighting, supposedly, in this situation, is because of good versus evil, according to religion.
Yes, as it stated in the beginning, the reason he can validate the initial advancement into the Ukraine is because of, quote unquote, their sinful Western ways, including gay pride parade. And as we know that the president of Ukraine was an actor, and he did do a couple of comedy skits or little bits by way of address and being playing the homosexual. Yeah.
Jewish, of course he did.
Well, yeah, he is Jewish, and of course that's one of the sticks.
Think about it. They invented porn in America.
Yeah.
Right? They invented porn. They're the ones in charge of the entertainment system. They're the ones putting black men in dresses. But if you look close enough in their movies, there are some movies where their top male actors were in drag.
It was done more ever before in Hollywood. You had, you might see it in, Abbott and Costello, Three Stooges, although they're comedy, but that was the beginning of it all, with starting out when they was doing their shows in New York or vaudeville. Yeah, sometimes they might dress up, doing a comedy skit as a female, and they pushed that agenda from that point all the way till now, but more so now.
It's all the way live now, boy.
And that's saying a mouthful too, all the way live. Yeah, it's just
no off switch.
It seemed like where do you draw the line at? This is reality. This is, they blurred the lines, as they say. In this conclusion of war and religion, hopefully this shed light on the subject of all matters of modern day. And again, right before Easter, we're we're taking this moment to tackle this situation, what it consider morality or moral, and how would it affect us from this point on. And in that, as always, Vessel 2, would you like to grace us with your final thoughts?
Thank you, Vessel 1. Final thoughts. Spirituality Over Religion is a book that's out there that I would recommend everybody to invest their time in getting. Religion has its place, but everybody needs to find the square to stand on regardless. Believe in yourself. Take care of those who you consider to be loved ones. Peace.